Legends, welcome along to a brand new episode here on Here's Rodder's Reviews, and we're going to do another show that you need to watch. Legends, welcome along to a new episode on Here's Rodder's Reviews. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart, and this episode we're going to talk about the 1970 show UFO. Oh gosh, guys, I'm pretty sure we all know Thunderbirds. I remember Thunderbirds, and of course, you know, that was revamped and re-released in CGI sort of animation a few years back. So it's Thunderbirds and that sort of thing is pretty fresh in pop culture at the moment. But Gerry Anderson Productions that created that is the same guy created UFO back in 1970. And when I use the Thunderbirds as an example, don't think for a second that UFO is going to be very much like Thunderbirds. This show, we had an episode knocking about the house way back in the early 80s. It was recorded in VHS off the television. One episode in the middle of the series, and like I watched it quite a few times as a kid. Never got the opportunity to really sit down check out the series itself, but it was rerun recently on Forces Television here in the UK, and literally just finished it off 100% the other evening there. Not like Thunderbirds whatsoever. This show is fairly darker than I would have expected from a Gerry Anderson show. Again, you know, example Thunderbirds and that sort of thing. But this here, it's about obviously UFO. It's about visitors from space trying to invade Earth, and they are pretty much coming to Earth. They're a dying race, and they're kidnapping people, or flat out just killing them and mutilating the bodies and taking body parts to transplant into their own dying race. So there's examples in this series where the opening episode, they do an autopsy on an alien that dies, and they discover that the heart was a human heart. Very, very dark series. It's absolutely fantastic. Would really highly recommend it. It's live action. It's not like Thunderbirds. It's not puppetry or anything like that. There's a lot of the effects and stuff are similar to like Thunderbirds, using models and miniatures and that sort of thing. A few of the effects pretty dated looking now, but most of them, you know, whenever you're using miniatures and sets like that mixed in with live action, you know, if it's done properly, it gives you that little bit of a more of a level of realism. I think that CGI even to this day still doesn't really give you. You still have that uncanny valley sort of a thing with CGI. But the organisation that's defending Earth is called Shadow, which stands for Shadow Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization. They are a secret organization that are located below a movie studio in London, and that's their cover. Ed Straker, the guy that runs Shadow, he's dual roles as the guy that owns the film studio, but his real career is defending the Earth from the aliens. In space, they've got SID, a big satellite named SID, which is a space intruder detector, or space intruder detector, and it's constantly scanning out, and it reports back to a moon base that they have. And on moon base, they've got 3 one-man ships called interceptors. When SID discovers a UFO's coming, the interceptors are launched, and SID coordinates with Moonbase, and they try and take out the UFO before it gets to Earth. But if it does manage to get past those defences on Earth, there is Skydiver, which is a submarine, but the front quarter of the submarine is actually a jet, and if it's needed, the submarine comes up to an angle and launches this jet from it, and then it, comes up out of the water into the air, tries to take out the UFO in the atmosphere, and if it fails and it gets to land on Earth, we've got a battalion of tanks that are called mobiles, basically. So it's fantastic. It's really, really good. Honestly, I did, in the excitement of watching this series, I actually ordered this off Amazon about a week and a half before we finished the series, because I thought, oh crap, they've made a feature-length episode of UFO, Invasion UFO. Now this is pretty good. This is pretty good, but this is essentially 3 episodes of the series that were edited together into like a movie format. So I take it this was released quite a while after the series finished as something to. This was released in 1980, which makes sense because the series was made in 1970, but it was set in 1980. So I reckon when we hit 1980 for real, they released this here as like a tribute to the actual series. But I would highly recommend checking out the series before you check this out, or I wouldn't even recommend you checking this out if you watch the series. This is good, and it's a good effort at making like a feature length out of the series. But having seen the series, I do believe that anybody that goes to see this movie, there's parts of it, because of the edit, that you don't get a lot of you don't get the context you really need for the material that it's coming from, if you get my meaning. The ending to Invasion UFO is a little bit disjointed, and having seen the series, the stories that's in this actually made more sense in the series than what they did in Invasion UFO. So if you are going to check out UFO, I highly recommend checking out the series. Again, as I say, it's incredibly dark compared to your average Jerry Anderson production. There is an episode on here which is fantastic, and I'm going to get into this in major detail on the podcast, Scheme Me Up Body. If you don't know about that, I've actually got a new science fiction podcast out there at the minute that's pretty much centered in and around Star Trek at this point, but I am going to jump into loads of science fiction over there in more detail than I can on YouTube. There's an episode where Straker, he is, at this point during the series, he's divorced from his wife because of the long hours he's working, and the relationship broke down, and he's getting visitation rights to see his son. And at the beginning of an episode, you see this happening, and the son wants to show Ed something, and while the kid's away getting it, the ex-wife comes out, and they have a moment where, she's got a new lover, a new husband, and him and Ed come face to face, and she pretty much just says, you better leave. And while he's leaving, the kid runs out to chase him down and gets hit by a car, knocked down, critically injured, in the hospital. Ed Straker, being the head of Shadow, gets the opportunity to use his influence to get a new experimental drug from America over to England that can save his son's life. But there's a UFO incident that happens during this episode as well, and because of the top level secrecy of Shadow, everything takes precedence over personal life and all that sort of thing. So he ends up boxed into a situation where they get the opportunity to get an alien that's turned against their own race and potentially can help Earth defend itself against the aliens, or save his son. And he tries his hardest to do both, but by the end of the episode he actually loses the son, and it finishes off with the wife and the new husband horror and absolute pieces, telling him she never wants to see him again, and the camera pans out and he's left standing on his own in the middle of the hospital. It's a very, very dark episode, and so emotionally acted by the actors. That episode in particular brought a flipping tear to my eye. Just the heartbreak of the ex-wife coming out from learning she's just lost her son was absolutely fantastic. That's not the darkest of the episodes, but it is, again, it's not Thunderbirds, it's absolutely flipping brilliant. I would highly recommend checking it out as soon as you can.